これが最強のフュージョンだ。
The third anniversary debuted the first Dokkanfest LRs into the game. LR Super Saiyan Goku and Super Saiyan Vegeta that transformed into Super Vegito, and LR Super Saiyan Angel Goku and Super Saiyan Angel Vegeta that transformed into Super Gogeta. Transformations were a new mechanic introduced with these two new LRs, and they allowed characters to transform mid-battle when certain conditions were met. Starting from turn 6 and onwards, when HP was 50% or less, Goku and Vegeta would fuse into Vegito and Gogeta respectively. These transformations could link with other cards of the same name, as well as with identical cards in their untransformed state. Upon transforming, the unit would also gain a different passive, different links, and unique super attacks. Onto the units themselves, LR Vegito gave Potara category allies 3 key, 170% to HP and attack, and 130% to defense, as well as 3 key and 90% to stats for int types. LR Gogeta gave the same leader skill buffs but for fusion category allies and physical types, making him a better leader for the fusion category than Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Both units had the exact same passives in base. They raised attack and defense by 120% at the start of turn, and received an additional 2 key per rainbow key sphere obtained. Despite being very simple, they had the best defenses out of any LR to date, and could deal great damage when launching their 18 key supers, which they could get more consistently than most LRs. They were supremely powerful, and became even crazier once they transformed into their fused states. Super Gogeta and Super Vegito both fully recovered HP when they came out, and gained 150% attack and defense at the start of turn. Their key mechanic also became stronger, now providing an additional 3 key per rainbow key sphere obtained. However, the last part of their passive completely separated these two units from not only the rest of the game, but also from each other. LR Super Gogeta was super effective against all types, essentially making him a more overpowered version of int Super Gogeta. He was capable of dealing far more damage than LR Super Saiyan 3 Goku on average, and would have easily been the best unit in the game upon transforming. That is, if LR Super Vegito didn't exist. For whatever reason, Dokkan decided to give LR Super Vegito the ability to counter normal attacks just like AGL Super Vegito, which propelled his damage output to ludicrous levels. LR Super Gogeta was calculated to have an average attack of 3.5 million, whereas LR Super Vegito was calculated to have an average attack of 5.8 million. He could output almost twice as much damage as LR Super Saiyan 3 Goku and Super Gogeta, making Vegito far and away the most ridiculous card in the game. What prevented these units from completely breaking the game was the fact that it was incredibly rare to see these LRs transform, as almost no fights could even survive 6 turns against the Fusion and Potara teams. Both the Fusion and Potara teams faced very little difficulty against all the events in the game, with many of the best units in the game being a part of these categories. The Potara team consisted of the 2 hardest hitting TURs in the game, Tech Vegito Blue and Physical Super Vegito, as well as STR Rose, who was considered a contender for best overall TUR in the game. The Fusion team had access to int Super Gogeta, Physical Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, and Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, who were the 3rd, 4th, and 5th hardest hitting TURs in the game due to now having access to a 170% attack lead. AGO Super Vegito was also now the 6th hardest hitting TUR in the game under a double 170% lead, and was a powerhouse on the Potara team, which was considered even stronger than the Fusion team. Despite their inability to transform often, the 3rd anniversary LR's base forms were more than competent enough to be considered the best units in the game, and LR Super Vegito and Super Gogeta would remain relevant for many months. The 3rd anniversary brought back many of the events introduced during the 2nd anniversary. They released a new ticket banner during the countdown period, which had every LR up until LR Super Saiyan 3 Goku unfeatured on the banner. The tickets this time around could be used whenever you wanted while the banner was up, and weren't tied to specific days. The third anniversary login card was a Super Saiyan 3 Goku holding up 3 fingers. He was a solid option on Super Saiyan 3 teams with his 33% attack and defense support to Super Saiyan 3 category allies, and he actually saw some play on Super Saiyan 3 Bardock's team. They also brought back the Red Dragonstone, as well as a new Purple Dragonstone that could be bought from the shop in exchange for a Neo God Leader of your choice. Alongside the LRs, the dual Dokkanfest banners featured 4 new SSRs from Goku and Vegeta's iconic bouts: STR Majin Vegeta, AGL Super Saiyan 2 Angel Goku, Tech Kaioken Goku, and Physical Vegeta. These 4 SSRs were all very decent, with Super Saiyan 2 Goku and Physical Vegeta standing out from the 4 due to being more defensively oriented than their counterparts. Keeping with the dynamic theme from the countdown images, many of the events and characters released during the 3rd anniversary were related to the Planet Namek saga. They introduced Porunga wishes into the game, and every day players could collect 1 Dragon Ball by following the hint posted in-game. Porunga would grant you 3 wishes every time he was summoned, and you could summon Porunga up to 3 times during the campaign period for a total of 9 wishes. You could wish for potential orbs, Kais, Zeni, support items, training items, awakening medals, and green incredible gems, allowing players to gain valuable resources in bulk. They also held a stamina campaign and gave out a new free-to-play Namek Saga Goku as a reward. He was a decent free-to-play unit with some solid defensive capabilities, but the bigger standout for free-to-play players was Namek Saga Kid Gohan. This unit had his own orbs that you could farm from the Namek Saga story event, and he surprisingly had his own Extreme Z battle event in which you could get medals to Easy 8 Kid Gohan. Once Easy 8, Kid Gohan was considered the best free-to-play unit on JP. He was a nuker who gained 13% attack and defense for every key sphere obtained, and for every rainbow key sphere obtained, he gained an additional 2 key and 7% attack. He could hit quite hard and didn't struggle for key very often, and was a great option for newer players. However, in the same way Kid Gohan took the spotlight from Goku, Dokkan released a new batch of units that overshadowed every other free-to-play unit in the game, the Ginyu Force. Each member of the Ginyu Force had their own stage available on different days of the week, in which you could farm the Ginyu Force member as well as their own exclusive orbs. AGL Birder stacked defense on Super and had a high chance to evade enemies' attack after attacking in slot 1. He could easily get caught by super attacks in slot 1 before attacking, but he was still a decent tank. Tech Guldo was a debuffer who had a medium chance to stun on Super, and lowered the attacked enemy's attack and defense by 20% for 2 turns, making him a decent Super Battle Road option. Int Ginyu gained 3 key and 70% attack and defense when facing 1 enemy, and 50% damage reduction when facing 2 or more enemies. He was fantastic in Super Battle Road, and was a must-run on Extreme Int Super Battle Road teams. SCR Jace was a support unit, and was the first unit in the game to foresee enemy super attacks, which is referred to by the community as a scouter ability. He was also viable in Super Battle Road, and was very helpful in determining when and where the enemy would super. Lastly, Physical Raccoon gained 80% defense at the start of turn, and gained 14% attack for every attack received up to a maximum of 70%. He didn't have a gimmick like the other Ginyu Force units, and relied on his solid attack and defensive stats to get by. The Ginyu Force team was a godsend for new players, and was the first cohesive free-to-play team that could clear most of the events in the game. Around this time, they also revealed info about Dokkan Battlefield 2.0, which was officially released in the middle of March. This new battlefield was a much simpler version of the original Battlefield released during the 2nd anniversary, and completely scrapped the tower defense aspect of that mode. All you had to do now was make a team of 7 from your pool of 100 characters to take on the boss, and you would do this until you defeated every boss, in this case all 8 bosses. This event was still challenging for many players due to the sheer number of decent characters you needed to conquer this event, but it was still easier to grasp and clear than the original Battlefield. This event also came with a new free-to-play LR Tech Ginyu Force. Tech LR Ginyu gave Ginyu Force category allies 3 key and 100% to stats, making him the perfect leader for the free-to-play Ginyu Force units. LR Ginyu was insanely good. He gave Extreme Class allies 30% to attack and defense, and an additional 20% to attack and defense to Ginyu Force category allies. He was a good tank, and his offense was impressive enough to allow him to be one of the hardest hitting units in the game. Dokkan absolutely delivered with LR Ginyu and the 3rd anniversary free-to-play units, but there was still one major glaring flaw with the celebration, and that was the lack of content. The only new event during Part 2 was the Planet Namek Saga Extreme Z battle, which was very lackluster in terms of rewards. Furthermore, there weren't any new challenging events for players to test out the new 3rd anniversary headliners, which greatly disappointed players. Battlefield 2.0 wasn't officially part of the 3rd anniversary, so there was no new event or character released for over 3 weeks after the debut of the free-to-play Ginyu Force units. Instead, they decided to rerun 5 legendary summon banners, each featuring one of the first 5 summonable LRs. Many of these LRs were never featured on a banner before, so Dokkan decided to fill this 3-week gap with these banners so players could summon on the LRs that they didn't already have. Dokkan players, however, couldn't care less and were reaching their breaking point over halfway through this dead period. The game was drier than the Sahara Desert and interest was quickly fading. Fortunately, Dragon Ball fans still had the Dragon Ball Super anime to keep their hype alive. As the final battle of the anime unfolded, the penultimate episode of Dragon Ball Super aired on March 18th, and on that same day, Dokkan players were hit with pure shock the moment they opened the game.
Whis
はい。
悟空はとうとうたどり着いたんだな。まったくあの姿、あれこそが完全なる身勝手の極意。
Almost an hour after episode 130 released, Dokkan tweeted out that UI signed Goku would finally be able to be Dokkan awakened into a TUR, and had the ability to transform into Mastered Ultra Instinct Goku. UI Goku's kit was stunningly simple. It gained 100% attack and defense at the start of turn and transformed into UI Goku when HP was 50% or less. At first glance, UI signed Goku seemed like a slight downgrade from his SSR version, losing his dodge chance and base in exchange for slightly higher stats. But people quickly learned how wrong they were. UI Goku's transformation was incredibly easy to see, as there was no turn restriction attached to it, and at this point in the game, it was fairly common to get below 50% HP without dying. Once transformed, UI Goku gained 3 ki, 150% attack at the start of turn, while having a 70% chance to evade enemies' attacks. He also disabled enemies' guard when attacking, which meant that if he attacked a physical enemy, he would damage them as if he was type neutral against them. He also kept the ability to stack attack on super from his base form, which allowed UI Goku to deal great damage once transformed. A lot of people were initially upset that UI Goku lost his defensive buff when he transformed, but he was actually one of the most competent defensive units in the game, specifically in the most difficult fights in the game where untimely super attacks could result in instant death. Furthermore, people in the community calculated that on average, UI Goku's increased dodge chance did in fact outweigh the loss of his defensive buff. UI Goku was a dominant force in Super Battle Road and could dominate every Dokkan event in the game, including his very own Dokkan event, which was now the new hardest event in the game after Super Battle Road. His Dokkan event consisted of 5 phases, with phase 3 being a Spare Bomb Goku that had a one-shot super attack. The strategy for this phase was to either stun/seal him or use a Ghost Usher and kill Goku as fast as possible. The final 2 phases were some of the highest HP Dokkan event bosses in the game, and UI Goku at the end could attack up to 8 times within a turn. This event also came with 3 new Dokkan awakenings of older characters. STR Super Saiyan Blue Goku was decent after becoming a TUR, but the more interesting units were the 2 God Gokus. Strangely, AGL God Goku Dokkan awakened into God Goku from the Tournament of Power, despite being from the Battle of Gods movie. Both AGL and STR God Goku had the exact same leader skill and passive, gaining 80% attack and defense when performing a super. But what separated these two units were their links and super attack effects. AGL God Goku stacked attack on super, whereas STR God Goku raised attack and defense by 30% for 3 turns on super, making him a better defensive unit than AGL God Goku. Furthermore, STR God Goku possessed the first awakened link, which he shared with UI Goku, making him UI Goku's best linking partner. Alongside UI Goku, they released a new story event that came with Dokkan Awakenings for the Universe 6 Saiyans. AGL Caulifla was slightly powered up from her SSR state, now gaining 30% defense for 3 turns on super. Combined with her high dodge chance and medium chance to counter supers, she became one of the best banner units in the game. Physical Kale wasn't as impressive, but could dish out a lot of damage with her immense damage super and her ability to super attack multiple times within a turn. Physical Kefla also finally received a Dokkan Awakening into a TUR, and was on the level of a Dokkanfest exclusive character. Her additional attack in her passive was changed from a medium chance to be a super to a high chance. Her nuking passive was also increased from 10% attack and defense per physical key sphere obtained to 12% attack and defense for any key sphere obtained. These minor changes, in tandem with her stat increases after awakening, made Super Saiyan 2 Kefla a very powerful card. The last thing to mention from this celebration is Jiren, who like Kefla and UI Goku debuted into the game as an SSR. Jiren was the leader for the Universal Survival Saga category, and was a great Super Battle Road unit with his medium chance to stun all enemies at the start of turn. His SSR state gained 120% attack and defense at the start of turn, so people were anticipating his TUR to gain 150% or more at the start of turn, which greatly excited players. Almost a week later, JP officially released LR Vegito Blue. Global players were finally able to acquire him in the middle of February, and he more than made up for the 7 months of pain global players had to endure. He had an incredible leader skill, giving superclass allies 3 key and 70% to stats. He stacked attack and defense on 12 key super, making him the first LR to stack on super, and he greatly raised attack for 1 turn on 18 key super. Furthermore, Vegito Blue gained 80% attack and defense at the start of turn, and gained more key the less HP you had remaining, up to a maximum of 10 key. As always, people greatly underestimated LR Vegito Blue based on his details, and deemed him mediocre due to the lack of any counters and additional supers in his kit. However, LR Vegito Blue was arguably the greatest free-to-play unit in the history of the game. At the Rainbow level, LR Vegito Blue was calculated to hit harder than Tech Vegito Blue at 55% and Physical Vegito Blue at 79%. On top of this, he was far more competent defensively than both summonable Vegito Blue units, and could tank exceptionally well for a free-to-play card. The final advantage LR Vegito Blue had over his summonable counterparts was his link set. When LR Vegito Blue's details were initially released, he possessed the Over in a Flash link, but it was changed to Prepared for Battle on release. This was far better for LR Vegito Blue, as he was able to link better on the Potara team than Tech Vegito Blue, and he was often the better choice on that team as a result. He was an absolute monster in every team he was ran on, and performed exceptionally well in every difficult event in the game. The only thing that players were ultimately upset by was his grind. You needed 6 Fierce Battle units of every type for a total of 30 Fierce Battle units in order to complete the missions to obtain Vegito Blue's medals. This wasn't so bad for long-time players, but for newer players, this grind was almost impossible to complete, as you needed a box full of TURs that possessed the Fierce Battle link, which mainly consisted of summonable units. At the end of the month, the next Dokkanfest was released in the form of Turles, and he was the first AGL type Dokkanfest since Super 17 exactly 1 year ago. Turles gave 3 key and 150% to stats to movie bosses category characters, which consist of the main antagonists from the various Dragon Ball movies and not all villains from the movies, and 3 key and 50% to stats to extreme class characters. Turles was a crazy support unit. He gave all allies 3 key and 40% attack, and reduced superclass enemies' attack by 15%. He was perhaps the greatest support unit to date and was a must-run on every team. Additionally, when HP was 80% or less, Turles had a 25% chance of activating the Fruit of the Tree of Might boost for 3 turns. After transforming, Turles recovered 15% HP, gained 130% attack and defense at the start of turn, and lowered superclass enemies' defense by 80%. He was considered more valuable in base, but could do decent damage once transformed, while also having a 50% chance to stun the enemy on super. The day after Turles was released, Dokkan teased yet another game mode for April Fool's Day. They jokingly teased a dating simulation mode known as Dragon Ball Z Dolly Battle, and ended up giving all players a Dragon Ball Heroines trophy card as compensation. A week later, they released the Easy A for physical full power Frieza. His attack buff stayed the same, but he now gained 3 ki and 30% defense as the first attacker in a turn, and raised his defense by 30% for 3 turns on super. Despite receiving minor buffs, he was considered better than the previous 2 Easy A units, while still being capable of dealing good damage. However, Frieza wasn't a movie boss's character, so to further flesh out the category, they released a new double race banner featuring 2 new SSRs and an unfeatured LR, LR Beerus and Whis. LR Beerus and Whis gained 80% attack at the start of turn, and after receiving an attack, they gained an additional 60% attack and defense for 5 turns. They hit quite hard once their passive was fully activated, but the first attack they received could end up hurting them quite a bit. To compensate for this, LR Beerus and Whis recovered 7% HP on their 12 ki super and recovered 12% HP on their 18 ki super. They were a powerful LR and a solid option on movie bosses teams. More interestingly, the new banner unit SSRs alongside Beerus and Whis were unbelievably good. Imp Beerus was a decent damage dealing unit, but Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta and Bulma was one of the hardest hitting units in the game. They gained 100% attack and defense at the start of turn, and possessed the ability to counter normal attacks just like Super Vegito. This unit was actually released on Global first in the middle of January, and they were the hardest hitting TUR in the game on Global. On JP, they were the 6th hardest hitting TUR in the game while only being under a double 120% lead. On a hypothetical double 170% attack lead, Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta and Bulma would become the 3rd hardest hitting TUR in the game and would output more damage than most summonable LRs. They were a ludicrous banner unit that was competing with the top Dokkanfest at the time in terms of power, and that wasn't even all they had to their kit. Just like Dokkanfest Beerus, this unit would enter into a rage mode when HP was 30% or less and would become invincible for 1 turn. This was a fantastic ability in Super Battle Road, and Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta and Bulma instantly became the best banner unit in the game, with only AGL Tapion being arguably better than them. Moving on to the Golden Week celebration, Evolution Blue Vegeta made his long-awaited debut into the game as a transformation unit. Vegeta introduced the Pure Saiyans category into the game, which consists of characters who are Pure Saiyan by birth. As a result, this does not include Saiyans that were created by unnatural means, such as the Potara Fusion and Fusion Dance. This is why characters such as Gogeta and Vegito are unfortunately not on the category, as they are not pure Saiyans despite being full-blooded Saiyan. The 3rd anniversary LRs were also not a part of the category initially, despite the base cards being Goku and Vegeta. Blue Vegeta was quite good in base. He gained 120% attack and 60% defense at the start of turn, and launched 2 additional normal attacks. Furthermore, for every attack performed, he built up 7% defense up to a maximum of 70%. This allowed Vegeta to reach impressive defensive stats as the fight went on, and he was quite tanky compared to other Dokkanfests. However, Vegeta had a very lackluster transformation condition. He had a 30% chance of evolving into Evolution Blue Vegeta starting from the 4th turn from the start of battle, meaning it was completely up to chance whether Vegeta transformed. Vegeta was really strong if he was able to transform, as he gained 130% attack and defense at the start of turn, built up crit chance by 10% with every attack up to 70%, and launched 2 additional normal attacks. He was an offensive behemoth, and his damage transformed was up there with the top TURs. STR Jiren also received the Dokkan Awakening, but many people were disappointed in him because he only gained a 10% increase to stats in his passive. The only thing that was added to his kit was that he now performed guaranteed crits if the enemy was stunned, which further solidified his dominance in Super Battle Road. STR Topo also saw an awakening into God of Destruction Topo from Vegeta's Dokkan event medals. He was one of the better support units in the game, giving all allies 35% attack and defense, and lowered all enemies' defense by 50% in his passive. Moving on to the month of Mid. On May 17th, Dokkan released a new LR Bardock on a double rates banner. LR Bardock was underwhelming to many players, as he was the least hard-hitting summonable LR to date. He only gained 70% attack and defense at the start of turn, and gained a measly 30% attack when attacking with 18 or more ki. He was quite good defensively in Super Battle Road due to gaining 60% defense when facing 2 or more enemies, but that wasn't enough to impress most players. Unfortunately, the next Dokkanfest was as unimpressive as LR Bardock. Physical Super Saiyan Future Gohan. Future Gohan led the Future Saga category and gained up to 100% defense the less HP you had remaining, and 10% damage reduction at the start of each turn up to a maximum of 50%. Gohan's kit was catered towards longer events, despite the hardest event in the game being Super Battle Road, which only lasted for a couple of turns. Gohan's offensive numbers were also not as high as you would like. He raised attack by 100% at the start of turn, and raised attack and defense by 30% for one turn on Super. He was a mediocre damage dealer, and wasn't well suited to the difficult content out right now, though he had the potential to see a resurgence in the future if longer events were to be released. Around this time, we also got the third Prime Battle LR Super Saiyan Future Trunks. He wasn't as groundbreaking as LR Prime Battle Goku and Frieza were on release, but he was effective in Super Battle Road, gaining 8 ki and 20,000 attack and defense when facing 2 or more enemies. Tech Perfect Cell was due for his EZA a week later, and he was the best EZA we had seen yet. He now gained 15% attack and defense for every ki sphere obtained, and recovered 10% HP on Super. He was reaching impressive stats with 6 or more ki spheres obtained, and could tank the vast majority of bosses. He also gained an additional 1 ki per rainbow ki sphere obtained, which allowed Cell to super attack more consistently. Almost a year later, JP finally received the Otherworld Warrior SSRs, and for whatever reason, Pikkon was now INT instead of STR. They also slightly buffed them on JP compared to their global counterparts, but at this point they were nothing too noteworthy. Fast forwarding all the way to July, Dokkan held his first official Tanabata campaign. Every July 7th, Japan celebrates a holiday known as Tanabata, also called the Star Festival, where people write their wishes on colorful paper strips and hang them on bamboo branches. Starting this year, Dokkan began holding a massive campaign around this time, featuring a major summonable unit. The headliner for this year's Tanabata celebration was none other than Tech Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Goku. Tech Super Saiyan 4 Goku felt like a slightly upgraded version of STR Super Saiyan 4 Goku. He had a medium chance to counter super attacks, gained 100% attack at the start of turn, and gained up to 70% attack and defense the more HP you had remaining. Simply put, if you were at 70% HP or higher, he would outperform his STR counterpart, with STR Super Saiyan 4 Goku doing more damage once your HP was below 70%. Many people were disappointed by him being barely better than his second anniversary version, and it also didn't help that his category was a complete mess. He introduced the full power category into the game, which includes characters that use the absolute limit of their power that they possessed at that time. This vague concept of a category resulted in a lot of notable omissions, such as LR Majin Vegeta, and overall the team wasn't very cohesive link-wise. This campaign also came with the return of Purunga Wishes, as well as a new item known as Wish Strips. These Wish Strips allowed players to recruit for free up to 7 characters from a pool of 77 summonable SSR characters, which was really good for newer players. The 4th Dokkan Battlefield was also held 2 days later, and with it came a new Battlefield LR. LR Metal Cooler Army. His leader skill was the counterpart to LR Vegito Blue's, giving 3 ki and 70% stats for extreme class allies. He gained up to 90% attack and defense the more HP you had remaining, and launched an additional attack that had a 10% chance of becoming a super, as well as an additional 50% chance of launching another attack that had a 10% chance to be a super. He was boasting good stats while having the ability to super up to 4 times within a turn if you counted the additional from his hidden potential. He was by far the best extreme class free-to-play LR. It was comparable to LR Vegito Blue in terms of power. In Ultimate Gohan's EZA was a bit underwhelming, and many players saw him as inferior to his STR counterpart, so we'll just skip right past them. The more exciting news came on July 19th when Dokkan released 10 additional Super Battle Road stages. Stages 11 and 12 were limited to Super and Extreme class units respectively, with the remaining 8 stages being limited to specific categories. The most notorious stage of the batch was the Realm of God stage, largely due to the need to rely on UI Goku's dodge against a massive number of hard-hitting enemies. These new stages came with a new LR reward card, LR Goku. LR Goku had an even better all-types leader skill than the previous Super Battle Road reward card, giving all allies 3 ki and 100% to stats. He was a very good support unit for super class allies, giving them 2 ki and 30% to attack and defense, and an additional 20% attack and defense when HP was 50% or less. Combined with his medium chance to dodge, Goku was a viable option in difficult events, and he was a worthy reward card for completing these new difficult stages. At the end of the month, we received a new Dokkanfest character, Physical Android 17 from the Tournament of Power. 17 was the leader for Androids category characters, which consists of mechanical and biomechanical beings that are primarily created by the Red Ribbon Army. Physical 17 was a jaw-dropping support unit on par with AGL Turles. He gave all allies a massive 3 ki and 60% to defense. He made every unit ran next to him better defensively, making him a must-run on every team just like Turles. He also reduced damage received by 40% when HP was 77% or less, making him a solid tank in his own right. Unlike Turles, 17 was also capable of doing decent damage, as he gained 120% attack when attacking with 12 or more ki. Alongside the release of 17, they also held a Dragon Ball Fighterz collab campaign and released 2 new banner units, Tech Android 16 and STR Android 21. 16 was a strong tank, especially on Android teams, as he raised defense by 30% for each Android category ally on the team, up to a maximum of 90%. Combined with his high chance to guard and an additional 80% defense boost at the start of turn, 16 became a fantastic defensive option for 17's team. STR-21 was a transforming unit who had a 30% chance to transform into Evil 21 starting from turn 4, provided your HP was 50% or above. She had solid start of turn stats, could heal HP, and lower the enemy's attack and defense, making her a strong pick for Super Battle Road. To further buff the Androids team, they released a new legendary summon banner featuring LR Perfect Cell and Cell Jr. LR Cell was a Super Battle Road killer. Not only did he have an AoE 12 ki super attack, he gained an additional 1 ki and 10% attack per existing enemy. Combined with his start of turn 90% attack buff, Cell was capable of obliterating an entire wave of enemies on his own. If you used items to buff Cell's attack or were able to proc an additional super attack from the hidden potential, it wasn't uncommon to see LR Cell kill an entire phase in Super Battle Road in one turn. He was also good in regular Dokkan events, but he truly shined in events with multiple enemies. The final thing to note is that in the middle of August, they held a campaign to commemorate the upcoming release of the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie. They released an Extreme Z battle against Wrathful Broly, and while there was no EZA character tied to the event, players were able to acquire 30 stones and a massive amount of hidden potential orbs of every type. However, just like this time last year, people quickly shifted their attention elsewhere. The countdown images of the 250 million download celebration once again teased a Namek Saga themed celebration. But unlike the 3rd anniversary, players knew that there was no misdirection this time around. And that was because the community was presented with the most elaborate leaks in the history of the game, revealing every single character and event coming long before the celebration even started.
貴様がフルパワーになんのを待っているのは、最高の貴様を叩きのめしたいからだ。
この猿野郎が
If you enjoyed what you saw, please like the video and subscribe to stay tuned for future parts, as well as leaving a comment down below on your thoughts on this era of Dokkan. This was a bit of a transitional period for Dokkan, as the Dragon Ball Super anime had finally come to an end, and the devs were starting to experiment with new unique mechanics. I'll see you guys in the next part when we cover the 250 million download celebration and the start of a new era of Dokkan animations.